There is a troubling and extensive list of grievances that Africa can hold against the country of France. In my opinion, it is the most predatory and colonial system currently functioning in the continent of Africa. It is a title that goes against everything France claims to be in terms of a honorable state. And in this video, I'm going to systematically break down every single grievance and colonial practice that France has committed against the continent of Africa. Maybe you're out there and you understand one or two things that France has done. This video is going to fill any gaps of knowledge that you may have. Thank you so much for clicking on this video today. I really appreciate it. If you don't know me, my name is TJ, I'm Nigerian and British mixed, and on this channel, we talk about African geopolitics. So the first point we're going to start off with is something called the uranium paradox, because this is actually trending right now. Niger possesses the world's 7th largest uranium reserves, producing 2,020 tons in 2022. That's roughly 4% of global supply. For over 50 years, France companies have extracted 155,000 tons of uranium from Niger's soil. This uranium powers 70% of France's electricity through 56 nuclear reactors, with Niger historically supplying 15 to 20% of France's uranium needs. The devastating irony, while Niger's uranium literally keeps France's lights on, only 20% of Niger's 25 million people have access to electricity, one of the lowest rates globally. Rural areas see less than 5% electricity. Niger imports 73% of electricity needs, primarily from Nigeria. In July 2025, Russia signed an agreement to build Niger's first nuclear power plant and uranium refinery, something France never offered in 60 years of extraction. Russian Energy Minister Tizvilev committed to creating an entire system of peaceful atomic energy, including power plants, distribution systems, and local expertise. France extracted uranium worth billions, yet left behind 20 million tons of radioactive waste at closed mines in Komnik, contaminating water supplies with radioactive radon gas spreading through desert winds. So you can see how Russia just this week has committed to something that France never committed to in 60 years. When you have partners, it's in your best interest for that partner to win as well in any deal you make, which is why it's definitely an evil colonial practice that you've seen from France just in this area. So now we move on to the Colonial Continuation Pact, the foundation of modern slavery. Following decolonization in the 1960s, France imposed secret colonial continuation pacts, forcing 14 African nations to deposit 50% of their foreign reserve in the French Treasury. These nations can only access 15% of their own money annually, requiring French approval for anything beyond that. This system controls approximately 500 billion in African reserves, which France invests and profit from, while African nations struggle with liquidity crisis. The death toll: at least 22 African presidents who opposed these pacts were assassinated or overthrown, with documented French involvement, including Sylvestre Olympio of Togo in 1963, Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso in 1987, and Muammar Gaddafi of Libya in 2011, obviously with NATO and US involvement there. All of that death, that colonial pact system is linked to the next point, the CFA franc, economic chains disguised as currency. The CFA franc, used by 180 million Africans across 14 nations, represents the world's last colonial currency. Created in 1945, it requires member states to deposit 50% of foreign reserves with France, accept fixed exchange rates controlled by France, seek French approval for monetary policy changes. This system prevents these nations from devaluing currency to boost exports, printing money for development projects, setting independent interest rates. Result: CFA zone countries have 11.4% slower GDP growth than other African nations with sovereign currencies. 4. Franc Afrique, the corruption network worth billions. This shadow network has funneled an estimated 150 to 200 billion through corrupt deals since the 1960s. The Elf affair alone revealed 5 billion euros in illicit payment to France and African elites. French companies routinely paid 10 to 30% commissions on major contracts, financing French political campaigns, notably Jacques Chirac's presidential runs, while keeping African dictators in power for decades. Paul Biya, Cameroon, 42 years, still going. He's planning on running again in his 90s. Omar Bongo of Gabon, 42 years, now ousted. Gnassingbé Ndima of Togo, 38 years, who took over from his father, which combined with him and his father means his family dynasty's been in charge for over 50 years. And he's recently just changed the constitution so that he can maintain power indefinitely right now. There's a lot of issues going on in Togo because of that. So these are things linked directly to France's control, their political elites, and Africans' political elites. Military massacres. Operation Burkine's civil death toll. Operation Burkine, 2014 to 2022. Notice how a lot of this stuff I'm talking about is modern, present-day stuff. This is not stuff that happened 100 years ago. Operation Burkine 2014 to 2022 resulted in documented massacres, including Bounty Wedding Strike, January 2021, 22 civilians killed by French airstrike. Talate Massacre, 2020, 29 civilians executed. Central African Republic, multiple cases of sexual abuse by French troops, with victims as young as 10 years old. French forces operated with legal immunity. No soldier has been prosecuted for civilian deaths in Africa. The 600 million annual operation protected French uranium and business interests, not African lives. Now we move on to Total Energies, environmental destruction. Total Energies operates across 17 countries, extracting 15 billion annually, while gas flaring in Nigeria caused acid rain, destroying farmland, affecting 20 million people. Mozambique LNG project displaced 60,000 people with compensation of just $50 to $100 per family. The company blocks local refinery development to maintain Africa's dependence on importing refined petroleum at 3x the cost of crude exports. Vincent Bollore's empire, I made a video about him specifically a few weeks ago. Controlling information and trade. Bollore, worth 8.6 billion, controls Canal Plus, dominating 25 African countries, media, reaching 120 million viewers. And the video I made the other day talks about how he's purchased another African media company, meaning that that reach goes beyond just the French-speaking countries, but across the entire continent. He controls 16 major African ports until its 2022 sale. He controls railway networks across West Africa. He faces prosecution of 170 million in briberies paid to secure port contracts in Togo, Guinea, and Cameroon. This media empire shapes political narratives, while his logistics control strangles African trade. Port fees in French African-controlled ports are 2 to 3 times higher than Asian equivalents. Next, strategic resource theft. Beyond uranium. France depends on Africa for critical minerals. Uranium from Niger powers 70% of the French electricity. Gold from Mali, 50 tons annually, worth 2.5 billion. Cobalt from DRC, essential for French aerospace industry. Oil from Gabon, Congo, 60% of French oil imports. Contracts ensure that 60 to 85% of profits leave Africa. Resource-rich nations like Niger rank 189th out of 191 countries in human development. Assassination program, eliminating independent leaders. Documented French involvement in eliminating African leaders. Patrice Lumumba, Congo, 1961. CIA, France, and Belgium operation. Skyvenus Olimpo, Togo, 1963. Killed by French trained soldiers. Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso, 1987. Refused IMF loans, promoted self-sufficiency. Muammar Gaddafi, Libya. Planned African gold currency threatening the CFA franc. Obviously, that was in conjunction with NATO and the United States. So what's the pattern? Leaders promoting resource nationalization and currency independence are eliminated and replaced with French-aligned dictators. Next, control through debt and aid. France provides 9 billion in aid annually, but extracts 50+ billion through tied aid requiring purchase of France products at inflated prices. Debt servicing on loans, 5 to 8% interest, when China offers 2%. Technical assistant fees charge 1,000 euros per day for France experts. Result, every €1 in aid generates 5 to 7 euros return for France. Next, the Mitterrand-Pasquet arms trafficking, also known as Angola Gate. In 1999, scandal exposed 790 million euros in illegal French arms sales to Angola, fueling the civil war that killed 500,000 people. French officials, including Charles Pasquet and Jean-Christophe Mitterrand, received 50 million euros plus in bribes. The pattern repeated in Rwanda, 1994 genocide, Côte d'Ivoire, and Chad. French weapons fueled while French companies secured resource contracts in the chaos. The Rwanda genocide details France's active complicity in the 1994 genocide that killed 800,000 people, including $112 million in weapons supplied to the genocide forces. Training of the Interahamwe militia. Operation Tutsi's role in protecting perpetrators and enabling them escape. France's refusal to apologize or accept any responsibility. You know, it's so dark. Then we have the Sarkozy scandal in Libya, an incredible corruption case of a sitting French president, including 50 million in illegal campaign funds from Gaddafi. Sarkozy in 2021 corruption conviction. He's currently under house arrest for this right now. A 7-year sentence the prosecutors are currently seeking. Verdict September 2025. Of course, I'm going to cover that. The ultimate betrayal. Sarkozy later orchestrated Gaddafi's death in 2011 to cover up the evidence, obviously working with the United States. But you can see the pattern, you can see the motivation and the execution. You have the pressure of the French president who has a personal incentive to get rid of Gaddafi. And then that combines with the fact that he wants to nationalize, he wants to be independent. And then you appeal to America and the rest of the world and say, this guy's a bad guy, and he gets killed in front of the world. The fact that the French president took bribes from an African dictator and then had him killed is indeed an incredible scandal that perfectly illustrates the predatory nature of France's relationship with Africa. Next, ecological devastation without accountability. France companies have created 20 million tons of radioactive waste in Niger, destroyed 75% of Côte d'Ivoire's forest of cocoa. French companies controlled 40% of global cocoa trade. Polluted the Niger Delta, that's Total and Elf operated since 1960s. Never paid reparations or cleanup costs at an estimated 100 billion euros. Media manipulation and information control. Through Canal Plus, French media reaches 25% of the African population, while France 24 broadcasts in French across the continent. The media dominance legitimizes French-backed coups, demonizes leaders seeking independence, promotes French language and culture of over 2,000 indigenous African languages, prevents Pan-African solidarity by emphasizing ethnic divisions. The next is diplomatic coercion at the international level. France uses the UN Security Council veto threats to block investigations into French military crimes, prevents renegotiation for legitimate governments opposing French interests, impose sanctions on nations nationalizing French assets, control 40% of votes in Francophone organizations through proxy African states. Next, refusing accountability for colonial atrocities. France has never officially apologized or paid reparations for 1.5 million Algerians killed in 1954 or 1962. Cameroon massacres, 300,000 to 400,000 killed in 1955 and 1971. Madagascar uprising, 89,000 killed in 1947. Mestif massacre, Algeria, 45,000 killed in 1945. Tharoye massacre, Senegal, 300 to 400 African soldiers killed for demanding pay in 1944. Imagine that. You fight for France in World War II. All you ask for is your money after risking your life, and they kill you. Crazy. Macron's 2021 acknowledgement included no apology no reparations, and maintained that colonization brought positive elements. The bottom line, France extracts at an estimated 500 billion annually from Africa through its combined mechanisms, while African nations receiving French aid see poverty rates increasing. This isn't history, it's happening today. As Russia and China offer actual development partnerships, France's control empire faces its greatest challenge since the 1960s independence movements. So this was all that I could research to put together to explain why France is the most predatory act within the continent of Africa. Hopefully it filled some gaps on anything that you may have missed in the way France acts in the continent. And if there's anything that I've missed or anything that you want to add, please feel free to put it in the comments section. If you have nothing to put in the comments section, would it be too much for me to ask you to write the words "End French colonialism in Africa" in the comments section? It just lets me know that you watched the video to the end, you like what I'm doing, you want me to continue. Thank you so much for watching this video today. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.